I move to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
As we debate this issue, there are people who lose their lives. They are losing their lives right now because they can't afford their prescription drugs. So even as we hear about the magic of the pharmaceutical advances, they mean nothing if you can't afford to buy the drugs. And all of you colleagues would be hard pressed to find any issue that has more unanimous support than the idea of lowering the cost of prescription drugs. All the recent data tells us that 90% of Americans, 90%, that means certainly Republicans and Democrats and independents and everybody else, agree that the cost of prescription drugs is too high and needs to be reduced. The fact that Americans pay 2 to 3 times, maybe even more than 3 times, the cost of other countries for the very same drugs around the world is deeply offensive to Americans. And we can do something about this right now. You know, we hear from the pharmaceutical industry all the time that the cost of their research and development, number one, then tell us, show us the data. I have legislation, others have legislation that would require disclosure of how much are you really spending and how much is really taxpayer dollars that are doing much of the basic research. You know, most of these prescription drugs, these miracle drugs, begin with taxpayer investments into research and development. It is time, it is beyond time for us to say no one has to die. I remember when insulin was hitting the roof, and I think Mr. Welch pointed out that without any significant change to that drug, that the pharmaceutical companies were raising the price. That insulin, which had been, available almost to everyone, suddenly became so expensive. We have the names of people who died. We know a young man who decided when the cost went up, he was going to try and take care of himself, a student, and he shortchanged his own dosages, and he lost his life. No one should have to do that. I have been behind people at the pharmacy who present their prescription, look at the cost of that, and end up walking away. And often it is the people who are the poorest because they don't have the kind of insurance or a Medicare Advantage plan, and have to walk away. We're talking about billions and billions of drugs that could save lives that are inaccessible, period. And I was there, many of you were there, I think, probably, when we saw the Medicare Part D and watched how the pharmaceutical industry made sure that the language saying Medicare may not negotiate for lower prices goes into that legislation, and it's still there. Now, the VA, of course, does negotiate, and fortunately, our benefits, our veterans have lower costs. It's an outrage. It is a scandal. And now we have an opportunity not only to lower the price, but to then be able to use that money that we are handing over to the pharmaceutical industry to help expand Medicare, to help improve the healthcare of people in this country. We cannot let this opportunity pass us by. We deserve, like people all over the world, for the very same drugs, to pay a reasonable price and to be able to keep our country healthy. And with that, I urge a yes vote, and I yield back.